Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our Work from Home Tech Training Tuesday. We are Bigger Brains, an online training company, and when everyone started working from home, we wanted to figure out a way to help, and we have access to a lot of great teachers that help us with our courses, and so we asked them, what could they teach people on a free webinar once a week, and this is the result of that. I think this is our fifth one.
I think so, yeah.
Right, so today, we have Chip Reaves, the president and CEO of Bigger Brains, doing managing workflow in Microsoft Teams. So just a few housekeeping things before we get started. We're in a webinar, not a Zoom meeting, which means that you're automatically muted, but we do welcome you to talk with us in the chat. We prefer that you use chat versus Q&A because then we can just look in one place, just the two of us here. So, but if you do use Q&A, we'll try to catch it. So feel free to ask questions or make comments. Again, Chip might ask you to, or will ask you to use it at some point. If you'd like to speak, you can click the raise hand button by your name and we'll unmute you. And we mentioned earlier that we put all of these sessions on YouTube. So that's our YouTube channel. And there's also some free training up there right now that we have up there because of the COVID-19 situation. So Microsoft Teams Essentials and Microsoft Outlook Essentials are both free right now. And there's other content up there as well. And wash your hands. That's going to be true for a while. So again, we do these every week at 5 on Tuesdays. And you can go to getbiggerbrains.com and look at our latest blog post to see the registration links for upcoming webinars. So next week we have Gmail tips and tricks from our teacher, Emily Lugo. And then the next week, building a crisis management site in SharePoint from Idaho. I don't know how to say his last name, sorry.
I think I used to know how to pronounce it, but
I've never met him, so. But we'll be adding more, so keep an eye on our blog, and we're hopefully going to get a microsite up soon that just lists all these and has them, links to YouTube so that you can access them easily. Kind of keep up with what we're doing. But we're really glad that you're here with us. Again, we are Bigger Brains. We produce online training. We have a library of over 160 online training courses now. As I mentioned before, there's some free training on YouTube, so you can check out our style. And we have discounts available. We actually have a Udemy code available right now. So if you like to use Udemy, the code BiggerBrains will get you the price of $9.99 on any of our courses. So if you go to Udemy and you search for actually Chip Reaves, that's the easiest way to find our courses. You can take any of our courses for $9.99, which on some of them is a really great deal because some of them are 4-hour courses and things like that.
That's only good for 3 days. So if you guys are watching the recording after April 24th, sorry.
Oh, good point. Yeah, it's only good through the end of Friday. Okay, so as we mentioned earlier, today we have Chip with us. He is, again, the CEO and president of Bigger Brains. He's a serial entrepreneur who has started 5 successful IT companies. After 10 years building a successful IT service practice in Atlanta, he founded the Computer Troubleshooters USA franchise system alongside Wilson and Suzanne McCorist, which became the world's largest computer service franchise and received multiple awards from Entrepreneur Magazine, Franchise Business Review, and allbusiness.com. He's been interviewed on TV and other major media on topics related to small business technology, including ABC News, Business Week, TV, The Wall Street Journal, and the New York Times. So as the founder and president of Bigger Brains, among other things, he teaches our core courses on Office 365 and Microsoft Teams, which are 2 of our best-selling courses. And at Bigger Brains, especially since I came on, we're always trying to make our lessons shorter because that's what people want these days. And I'm always amazed at how long Chip can talk about something within the Office 365 suite. And I'll see the length of the lesson and I'm like, oh, there's got to be stuff we can cut out. And then I watch it and I'm like, no, it's all really good because he just knows so much and he explains it so well. And he's one of our best teachers, which I tell him that often. So today he's going to share an approach to using the combination of groups, teams, planner, and SharePoint to manage the workflow on your team. And with that said, I'm going to switch to him. Do you want me to show your slides now, Chip?
Yeah, sure, go ahead. So you can show the first one.
Okay.
So yeah, thanks everybody. I appreciate everybody being here. When we started doing these free webinar sessions, these Tech Training Tuesdays, our Work from Home Tech Training Tuesday is the long name. By far the biggest request we got was for Microsoft Teams. Right now, while we're in the middle of the pandemic, while we're recording this, a lot of people are working from home, maybe for the first time, certainly working from home more than we normally do. And a lot of organizations have moved to Microsoft Teams as a way to do that. And Microsoft Teams in the last couple of years has become really one of my favorite platforms. When we first started teaching Microsoft Teams, which I think was 4 years ago, that was not necessarily the case, but it's a really powerful tool. And I really like the different ways you can use it to kind of customize for your situation. So what we're going to look at today is specifically how you can use Microsoft Teams to manage a small project. So if you and some coworkers are assigned to create a new product or to create a new website or to create a new brand or something else that doesn't involve the word create, whatever your project is, we're going to walk through with some best practices and some tips and tricks on how to use Microsoft Teams and some of the supporting apps that come with Office 365 to make that easier. Now, I realize that it's entirely possible. There's 24 people on the call that some of you have never used Microsoft Teams before. So quick question, and you can answer in the chat window. Is there anybody here who has never used Microsoft Teams before? Totally okay if that's the case. Let us know in the chat. And either we're slow to respond or nobody. So, oh, Virginia's never used it. Okay, all right. So, yeah, and Susie, we started using it when we first went to work from home. Just started. Yeah, there's a lot of people that have just started using it, and it takes a little getting used to. But hopefully, our free courses on YouTube can help you guys with that. For those who have never used it or know nothing about it, Microsoft Teams is basically a hub for collaboration. I don't know for sure the origin story of how Teams got started, but I know that 5 or 6 years ago, Slack was becoming a very popular app. And we were seeing a lot of companies, especially in the big corporate world, start using Slack for employee chat, employee communication, a little bit of collaboration. And Microsoft does a lot of things well. They do some things not so well. But one of the things they do well is look at trends. And I think they saw the success that Slack was having in the marketplace and realized that they've got all these apps. Microsoft has all these apps, but they have nothing similar to Slack. And so they wanted to create something that could compete with Slack. And they looked at what they had, and they had a lot of great pieces. They had Microsoft Exchange, which is a great, it's the backbone of email for Office 365. So it's kind of a great tool for chat and collaboration and kind of basic communication. And then they had Skype and Skype for Business, which used to be called Link, which was a great tool for having audio calls and video calls and doing some screen sharing and things like that. And then they had SharePoint, which was a lot of people call it the Swiss Army knife of business productivity. It was just kind of behind the scenes server that could share files and store files and let people work on the same file at the same time. And what they came up with was a way to put all these things together in one app called Microsoft Teams. And in the early days of Microsoft Teams, it was a little kludgy. You could kind of tell where the differences in the apps were when something was using Exchange and something was using SharePoint. Today, it's gotten a lot smoother. But knowing that those pieces are behind the scenes still kind of helps. So Teams does all those things that I just mentioned. You can use it for calls and meetings, you can use it for chats, you can use it for file sharing. And there's also a lot of other Office 365 apps and third-party apps from other providers that integrate with Microsoft Teams that you can use in your Teams environment. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, Jackie. So we're going to look at Teams, and we're going to look at Teams in particular in conjunction with three other apps and services. Office 365 Groups, which is actually the fundamental underpinning of Microsoft Teams. For a short period, Office 365 Groups was the primary way that Microsoft recommended people collaborate before they came out with Teams. And then pretty quickly, once Teams came out, it kind of became, forget that groups thing we were talking about. Teams is much better. But for simple situations, groups can actually work fine. And Teams is, like I say, the underlying piece of Microsoft Teams. And there's a couple of important things that Groups does that Teams does not do, and we're going to talk about those. And SharePoint, like I mentioned, the tool for sharing files. You can also use SharePoint outside of Microsoft Teams. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today too. And my favorite of the newer generation of Microsoft apps is got to be Microsoft Planner. It's an Office 365 app. You can use it for kind of an easy group project management sort of situation, and that's exactly what we're going to do today. So let me take over sharing. Jackie, I think you have to unshare.
Done.
And I have to remember how to share. Yeah, so let's switch over to, oops, Teams.
I want to read all your emails.
That's okay. There's nothing terribly embarrassing. I had it on a advertisement, but it didn't stay. So let's talk about a hypothetical situation. Let's say that you're part of an organization, maybe you're part of a department, maybe it's a small business, maybe it's a large organization, whatever. And you have a need to create a project team around something. So I want your input. What kind of a project team are we going to be building here? What is it that you and your collaborators, you and your colleagues have been tasked with doing? Did I figure out where my chat window went?
Someone says local government. Marketing a new product is another person.
So local government is kind of, that's an interesting one. I like that one. But let's drill down a little bit, because local government's kind of, that's a lot of stuff. When I'm talking about a project team, I'm talking about one task, not necessarily like one, like, eat breakfast, but, one, design a new something, or revise something, what would be something that, okay, open a community center for a park and rec agency. Ooh, repaving a road. You guys are a lot more interesting to me. Transferring face-to-face workshops to an online platform. That is actually, that's an interesting one too. Develop a digital tool. I am not sure what that, that may be outside the scope of my knowledge. Interesting, okay. Using Teams for everything, staff meetings, teaching students, planners, engineers, econ. Let's take something specific, and I like this suggestion of opening a community center for a park and rec agency, which I know nothing about. So I'm sure the suggestions and examples that I'm going to use are totally nonsensical, in the same way that people who start talking to me about computers and Office 365 oftentimes don't make sense. Just do what I do and smile and nod along.
What you do when I'm talking?
Yeah. So that's our task. Let me write this down so I don't forget. Open a community center. So in Microsoft Teams, the app, I'm going to switch over to that here. Oops, let me get that chat out of the way. So in the Microsoft Teams app, you're going to have a lot of different teams. One of the big questions that people always ask is, how many teams should I have, especially when they're setting it up for the first time. And the truth is, a lot of organizations have, in some cases, more teams than they have people. The decision you make inside Teams, so, and this is the confusing way that Microsoft names things. The app is called Microsoft Teams. Inside Teams, you have teams. So we have a team called Awesome Video Project. We have a team called Internal Staff. We have a team called Video Production, and so on. And these are actual teams inside Bigger Brains, by the way. Some of them are fake that we use for classes, like the one that I'm on right now, which is why it's totally safe. You're going to have a different team each time you have a different group of people or a different purpose. So my definition of a team inside Microsoft Teams is a team is a group of people with a purpose. Anytime you're working on something that's going to involve a different group of people, that is probably cause to start its own team. If you have the same group of people, but they're working on something that has a different purpose, that's probably a cause to start your own team. It's normal to have dozens of teams, hundreds of teams. Some organizations have thousands of teams. Yes, it sounds like it's unwieldy. Microsoft does some stuff to help with that. We're actually going to talk about that a little bit, and some other things that we can do to help with that. But so in this case, let's assume that our Microsoft Teams environment is for a local government, and we're part of a small committee who's been tasked with opening a community center for the Parks and Rec department. So we want to create a team for that. My Outlook is reminding me that I'm late for an event that got canceled a long time ago because you can't have a community barbecue. So we're going to create a team specifically for this project. Now, in this case, for reasons that will become clear later, I'm going to call it Project Blue. So to create a new team, I'm going to come here in Teams down at the bottom of my Teams list. Now, so let's look at some quick navigation for those of you who haven't been here before. Our top bar has our search functions, create a new chat, these back and forward arrows, and our account menu over here. Our primary menu is this left side. This kind of chooses the area of Teams that we're inside. So we can have our personal chats. We can look at our overall kind of newsfeed activity, which is, that's what I was worried about. It's going to be a little slow with everybody on it, but that's okay. We have our teams and channels, which is where most of our project work and our collaboration is going to take place. We also have a calendar. You may or may not have the ability to make phone calls depending on your Microsoft Teams, and we have our files and some other stuff at the bottom. Primarily, we're going to be looking at Teams chat and activity most of the time when you're using it. Inside the Teams section, I've got my pinned channels up here at the top. As I scroll through, each of these main categories is a team. The pieces underneath it are a channel. So we're going to create a new team for our community center opening project. I'm going to click down here at the bottom where it says join or create a team. And if I wanted to, I could create a team from here. Just click on create and walk through the steps. There's a reason why I'm not going to do it from here yet, though. Most of the time, this is fine. Most of the time, if for the purposes of your project, you just need to have conversations, collaborate on files, share applications, maybe planner boards like we're going to look at and things like that. This is totally fine. If there might be a reason for you to have a dedicated email for this group, or if there might be a reason for you to have a dedicated calendar for this group, then you don't want to create your team here first. And the reason for that is Teams in itself doesn't have a great way to have a group email. There is sort of a way it doesn't work that great. And it does not have any kind of shared calendars. Calendaring is just not a part of Teams, which I know is weird because a lot of you are looking at the screen right now and you say, but stupid, there's a button right here that says calendar. I know it's there. What this is going to show me is this is my personal calendar. It's getting that from Outlook. It's getting that from Exchange. Nobody else is going to see this. This is great when I need to schedule a meeting with my colleagues because I can see what's free on my calendar. And not only that, when I go to create a new meeting, I can look at their calendars and see when they're free too. I don't see what they're doing, but I'll see the free spots on their calendar so I can plan the meeting for when their calendar is open. That's great, but it doesn't help if I need some kind of a group calendar for this project. So let me go back to Teams. Instead, if either one of those is true, that having a group email account would be helpful or having a group calendar would be helpful, then you want to start by creating an Office 365 group first, because those are both features that Office 365 groups have. To do that, we have to start in Outlook. So I'm going to go to my Outlook desktop app. And this is all of my email. Don't judge me by the number of emails in my inbox. I'm just going to guess that most of you have not used Office 365 groups because most people I encounter haven't. But if you use Outlook for your email, either the web version, the desktop version, the Windows or the Mac versions, if you scroll down in your folder list, you'll see a section called groups. Now yours might be empty. Mine has a few. We're going to create a group here first. So I'm going to come to the group section. I'm going to right click, choose new group. It's very simple. I'm going to give it a name, and we're going to call this Project Blue. And I'm going to put Community Center, so I don't forget. And notice a couple things that this box has given us. So the name that I gave it is Project Blue Community Center with spaces and parentheses. It's creating an email address, which is Project Blue Community Center at bigger-brains.com. Bigger-brains.com is our organization. It created an email address based on all the words that I use, taking out the spaces and taking out the punctuation. I can give it a description. I can give it a classification, which our organization doesn't use, so it's grayed out. I can choose whether this is a public group. It's open for anybody to join if they want to, or it's private. Only I and anybody else I designate as an owner can allow people into this group. I'm going to go with private. And notice this checkbox. Send all group emails and events to the members' inboxes. So if I want to make sure that anytime an email is sent to both that group address and also whenever there's activity inside the group, which probably won't happen, that everybody who's a member of the group is going to be emailed about it, I want to leave that checked. I'm going to choose create. And depending on how fast Microsoft is at the moment, that's not too bad. So now I can add more members. So Jackie, I'm going to make you a member of Project Blue.
I had a feeling.
And I'll, let's add, oh, Kathy's here. Let's see if I got Kathy in here. Yeah, we'll add Kathy as a member. So I'll choose add members. Notice that Jackie is a member of my organization. Kathy is an outside guest. She has her own email. She's not a member of my tenant. You don't have to be to put them in this group. You don't have to be to add them to Microsoft Teams. You can add anybody outside your organization, clients, vendors, contractors, family members, whatever makes sense, provided your administrators have left that function enabled. Now, in some security situations, your IT administrators or your team owners will disable that feature. That's a conversation to have internally to see if you need that. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time inside groups. There's a lot of stuff you can do here. We're not really going to use this, except to say that there is this calendar that I felt like we might need. If I click on calendar, you can see it opens in a separate window. And if you remember all the stuff that was on my calendar, just to kind of prove this is a new calendar, there's nothing here. So let's give it a meeting for tomorrow. Let's do a new appointment tomorrow. Oops, it opened in my other monitor. Let's call this lunch discussion applications or whatever. And since I said lunch, let's make it 11:30 just so we can see this later. And so now we have something on our Project Blue calendar. The reason we had to do this part first, all teams have a group, but and in the old days, every time you created a team, it created a group. And what started to happen was, as organizations had hundreds and thousands of teams, that list in Outlook down here started to get huge and huge and huge. And you can see mine already has quite a lot of groups. And Microsoft rethought things a little bit. And today, by default, when you create a team, it still creates a group, but the group is hidden. So it's hard for you to use those features like the shared calendar and the email address because the group itself is hidden. If you think you might need the benefits of the group, the shared email, the shared calendar, create the group first. Okay, let's go back into Teams. So now we're going to create our team. And this is the whole point of today's project. So we're going to choose the same button. We're going to go back to create a team. Notice here I have a choice. I can build a team from scratch, or I can create it from an existing group or team. Well, since we just created that Office 365 group, this is the one that we want to use. And
so it seems like, Chip, that you might more often want to create an Office 365 group when it's like an organizational team, you know, like one that's going to stick around for a while that would want an email address. Whereas if you're creating a team for like a more temporary thing, maybe you don't need it.
A lot of it depends on the purpose of the email address. See, the nice thing about the email address is anybody can send to it. So in this case, if this community center project might involve people outside the organization or outside the group, outside the team that need to send in suggestions for a name, send in suggestions for a location, you know, whatever, having that regular email address is kind of nice. And it's just like a regular email address. It's a public email address. You don't have to be a member of the organization. You don't have to be a member of the group to send to it. Anybody can send to that email address. And when they do, all of the members of the group are going to receive it. So it just depends.
Yeah.
But you are right. 99 times out of 100, you don't need to create a group. It's only in those situations where the group email might be helpful or the group calendar might be helpful.
Okay.
So we're creating a team from an Office 365 group. This is the list of all the groups that don't currently have teams. And down here at the bottom, there's my Project Blue. I'll choose that and I'll choose Create. Now, if you've created a team before, normally it asks you questions about who do you want to be in the team and is the team public or private or org-wide. We answered all those questions when we created the group, so don't need to do it again. It keeps those same settings, and boom, our team is set up. So
Chip, we have a good question. Can you send an email from that address?
That is a good question. You can do it from a shared mailbox, but yes, you should be able to.
I would think you could in Outlook, like somehow.
Let's take a little side tour and try that theory. So I'm sending an email. There is a way to view. If this starts taking too long, I'm going to jump out and we'll come back to this later. It's not finding it. Let me research that and email me offline. I'm curious about that myself. I haven't done that before. Okay. Meanwhile, back on our team. So we have our team created, but right now it's a little bit of a blank canvas. So back in the chat window, you guys let me know what kind of things does this project team need to do. So we have a team, again, it's a group of people, a committee, let's say, who's been tasked with opening a community center for the Parks and Rec Department. What kind of activities does that committee need to do in order to do its job? They're going to have discussions, they're going to have documents to look at, they're going to need to look at maps, I'm guessing. I haven't opened a community center before. So again, forgive me for being naive, but what kind of activities are they going to need to do?
Get public input.
Public input, good. I'll write this down so I don't lose track. Good, public input, PR plan.
Budget.
Sure.
Permits.
Cool. All right, that gives us some stuff to start with. Jackie, if you'll keep an eye on that, let me know if survey and permits, okay. By default, a team has a couple of built-in functions. So we have a built-in area for conversations. So this is our, let me find it over here on the left so it'll make more sense. Here's our Project Blue team. It starts with one channel. Each channel is a topic of conversation. So a team is a group of people with a purpose. A channel is a topic of conversation. By default, all new teams start with one channel, which is called general. There are a couple of different schools of thought about general. Some people, if it's a small project, they use it for everything. They put up, all the conversations happen in general. Another school of thought is that you shouldn't really put anything in general, that general should kind of be the administrative area and any topics of conversation need to go elsewhere. So, but we have inside general, you see where it says posts, we have posts, we have files, or at least we have a section for files. There's no files here yet. Let that load. And then by default, we have a wiki in our version of Teams. Your teams may or may not have the wiki by default, which I'm kind of mixed on the wiki. I'm not a big fan of the wiki. But we have this conversation area for general, but let's take permits, for example. We need to have conversations about permits and what was the other one? Permits and surveys. So let's create a channel for that. So in our Project Blue, there's a 3-dot menu to the right. I'm going to choose that and choose Add a Channel. We'll call it Permits and Surveys. I can put a description in if I want to. With the privacy, by default, all channels are standard. There is a new option, and literally it's been created in the last 6 months, called private. With a private channel, what it means is that you can limit the people who see this channel. So your team is already limited. Your team is already limited, so only the members see it unless it's a public team. But if you want to have a channel that, for example, only the managers are in, only the directors in, or maybe a subset of your project team are in, then you can choose a private channel. That's outside the scope of today's webinar. So let's stick to standard. I'll check this box for automatically show. It won't matter. It's the first channel. So we'll choose add. Again, depending on how fast Microsoft is, not bad today. Usually it's a few seconds. The only reason I mention that is because with everybody in the world using Teams for the first time, Microsoft has seen, I think it's a 44% increase in usage worldwide on Microsoft Teams in the last month. Their servers are being hammered pretty hard. So now we have our team called Project Blue, and now we have 2 channels. We have one for general and one for permits and surveys. We also talked about having a PR plan. So let's go ahead and create a channel for that. And the thing about the channels is it may be the same group of people, but these are different topics of conversation. So, and the reason for that is as we're having conversations in here about the PR plan, like, so I can post a question. Everybody else who's a member of the team can see this and they can reply. And again, the nature of replies and all the formatting stuff you can do. There's a lot of stuff in here you can do. You can even do like GIFs and emojis and stuff. We're not going to cover all that today. That's in our Teams course if you want to take a deeper look at it. But there's a lot of stuff you can do there. But the reason that we have these different channels is because if we're having a conversation about the PR plan, and we're also having a conversation about the permits and surveys, and the text keeps kind of overlapping each other, it's hard to keep things coherent, right? If we're having a great conversation about the possible PR activities we could do, and it keeps being interrupted by somebody asking if we pulled the permit for the such and such a site or such and such a utility yet, it breaks the flow. So people always ask in the same way they ask about, thanks Jackie, in the same way they ask about how many teams should I have, they ask how many channels should I have. There's not a right or wrong for either question. Again, my rule of thumb is a team should be a group of people with a purpose. A channel should be a topic of conversation. What I do recommend is don't necessarily set up a lot of channels up front. My experience has been whenever I do that, the things that I think we're going to talk about ahead of time wind up not actually being what we talk about, or things that I think, like I might have permits and surveys as two different conversations, and then we find out that they're really related and the conversation should be the same. So what I prefer is to let the conversations happen organically. By default, and again, you can control this when you create the team. If I wanted to come in and limit this, I can come into manage the team and go into settings, and I can limit what my members can do. But by default, anybody in the team can add a channel. Anybody in the team can add tabs and add apps and add files. I can restrict that if I want to, but normally I think leaving that open is leads to a more collaborative experience, a more productive experience. So we're going to leave those alone for here. Let's go back to our PR plan. We have the beginning of a conversation here, and Jackie has helpfully replied. So we'll have a lot of conversations in here. That's kind of basic teams. We cover that in pretty good detail on the free course that's on YouTube right now. So I don't want to spend too much time on that. We also have our file section. So in the file section, just like you would imagine, we can either upload files we already have on our computer or server. We can create files directly from here, Word documents, Excel, PowerPoint, and OneNote. We can copy them from other sources, other SharePoint servers, Dropbox, all that kind of stuff. The nice thing is any files that are here, everybody on the team has access to, and we can access them even at the same time. So if we have an Excel spreadsheet, for example, with a list of vendors, we can all refer to that spreadsheet. We can all update that spreadsheet and edit it as we need to. The wiki, I'm not going to talk about because I'm not a big fan of the wiki. So make sure my checklist to where we are. Oh, I did say to demo the files. Okay, so let's create an Excel workbook. Let's call it vendors. Now this is the web version of Excel. You can actually, I'm an old-fashioned guy, as you can probably tell from my hair. And so I prefer working in the traditional desktop applications versus the web apps. Younger people like Jackie, they prefer the web apps. That's fine. This is the web version of Excel. If I want to open this in the desktop version, you can see they have this hidden button right here in the middle that very cleverly says Open in Desktop App. If I click on that, it'll actually open Excel on my desktop. I can edit the document in Excel on the desktop just like I can in the web app. But for now, I'll just use the web app. Whatever we want to put here. Notice that in the web app, there's no save button because it's automatically saving. So when I'm done with that, I'll choose close. So here we are back in our PR plan team, and I've created this Excel spreadsheet called vendors. Now that's great, but it may be that we have thousands of files in here. And yeah, I can make folders. I could create a folder, for example, for receipts, or, okay, I didn't spell it right, don't judge me. But you can organize a folder structure, but still you may have a lot of files in here. If I want to make sure that that vendor file is front and center for everybody, I can actually add it as a tab. So you can see here across the top, I've got posts, files, wiki. I've got this plus button for add a tab. And if I click on that, one of my options is Excel. And I can choose one of my existing documents, or I can create a new one. So I'll choose this vendor document. And so now, across the top of my PR plan channel in my Project Blue team, which has gone down here again. There we are. I have a tab called Excel. So here's my post where everybody's having a conversation. You can see it actually added that I added this new tab. I can go to my files, which again may have thousands of files. I'm going to skip the wiki. I don't like the wiki. But if I click on this tab that says Excel, that will take me directly into that vendor sheet. Now that's not a very good tab name, so I can choose this drop down and choose rename. And let's call it vendors, because that's really what it is. That makes a little more sense. The idea is that you can take this kind of platform, you can take this framework of teams, and you can build it into whatever your team needs. So we talked about the different activities that this project team might be working on. I'll come back and answer some of those questions in just a minute. Let me flip to my page where I wrote my notes. Getting public input, PR plan, the budget, and the permits. So I probably want to have another Excel spreadsheet for a budget. I could put that here. I'd probably want to create another channel for the budget process, especially if it's going to have a lot of input. And then I would put a budget spreadsheet on its tab. The way I got to it, Glenn, let's do that. Let's create a new channel called budget. Let's skip everything else. So to get an Excel spreadsheet in here, if I already have one, I can just upload it. If I have it in another team, I can just copy it over. But if I want to create it from scratch, I can go to Files. First time I've been here, so there's a little bit of a lag. There's a New button here at the top. So if I click on New, notice I can create any of these new items. So I just created a new Excel workbook, and we'll call this Budget Draft. I can do that with anything. So I can create a tab that is a Word document. I can create a tab that's a PowerPoint document. I can create a tab that's a OneNote notebook. I really like using this for OneNote notebooks because that is a great place to collaborate. You can even, if you have a tablet, an iPad, or a Windows tablet, you can draw things. So especially as we're looking at possible layouts for the community center or possible locations on a map, to be able to pull up like a Google map view of an area. I actually did this recently because we're looking at buying a building. I brought up a Google map view of the building, the roof of it anyway, saved it in a OneNote notebook, and then started drawing on it to figure out, okay, where the walls need to be and stuff like that. It works well. So this is all good. This is all fairly straightforward. Let me pause here and see what questions we have before we go into the planner process.
Yeah, we have some great questions. The first one is the email checkbox when creating group used to notify people assigned to a task? Today, I assigned a task to a coworker. They did not get an email. By the way, I'm a member, not an owner.
Yeah. So you're talking about assigning a task in Microsoft Planner, I'm going to assume.
Yep.
They should, if the task is assigned to a person, by default, the person should be notified. With two exceptions. One is if the person was already in Planner and Planner thinks they've already seen it. And also you can disable notifications in Planner. So one of those two things might be the reason why you didn't get notified, but I'm not sure. Yes, in Planner, okay. Yeah, the other thing about Planner is Planner notifications are a little weird. The best way to make sure you get notifications is to assign yourself to a task. We kind of went through that today on our own side, where we discovered that one of our employees had been commenting and nobody knew it because nobody was assigned to the task. There's not a good way to force a notification in Planner right now that I know of. If anybody has a different knowledge than I do, let us know in the chat.
Yeah, I'm really hoping they add @mentions.
It's high on the list of requests.
Yeah. So we have more really good questions. I feel like if we start going through them, we might take up the time, but maybe that's what we should do if that's what people need to know. What do you think?
Let's spend a couple of minutes on it, and then we'll move forward.
Okay, so Susie was asking if it happens organically with creating channels, the conversation might begin in a certain channel and later it's decided to open a new channel. Can you move the chats from the previous channel into the new channel?
No, not unless they've added it. That also is a popular request. So if I go here, Yeah, there's no way to move a conversation. That is a popular request. One new thing they have done, which might sort of work, and I haven't actually tried this, so let's try something Chip's never tried before live on a webinar. Why not? Each channel has its own email address, right? So, well, I say right, like you guys know that. So here's our Project Blue. If I want to post something in PR Plan, one way I can do it is by sending an email to the email address for PR Plan. And if I click on the three-dot menu next to PR Plan, I can get that email address. It's going to be long and weird looking. So we'll wait for it to come up. So there's the email address. I'm going to copy that. Now, let's say that this conversation, should have ordered this a little bit better. Let's say that for some reason, this conversation needs to be, let's pick a normal one. This conversation needs to be in that channel. I hit the three-dot menu for this conversation, and there is a Share to Outlook button. This is new as of this week, which is why I've not tried it yet. I'm going to choose that. It's actually going to send the conversation over email. So the idea behind this is if you have a colleague who is old-fashioned like me, but not using Teams, so not like me, and you want to make sure they see a conversation that's happening, or possibly if there's a inappropriate conversation happening that you need to report to HR or something like that, you can use this to actually send a picture of this conversation to somebody via email. So what happens if I try to send this to the PR Plan email address? I have no idea. Let's find out together. So I'm going to choose Send. Now, normally, if I'd send this to a normal email address, they would see it as a picture. It would arrive as a normal email and it would have a picture on it. Let's go back to our PR Plan channel. I'm fairly confident that it's not going to show up as a normal conversation. I think it's going to show up as a picture.
That's still helpful.
It's still, yeah, so it is a picture, but it is helpful. Actually, yeah, so the subject line of the email came through as text. Everything else came through as a picture, and actually the picture did not include the pictures from the screenshot. So again, it's a new function, not entirely perfect, but it is one way you could kind of move some stuff over to a new channel. It is a popular request to be able to move content from one channel to another. You can move files, that's easy, but moving conversations, I don't know of a way to do that yet. So great questions, keep them coming. We'll answer them for as long as we can, but I want to move forward and talk a little bit about Planner. So let's go back to our permits and surveys channel. And let's say that here we need to be really focused on exactly what we need to do. So this is really kind of a project management or task management kind of situation. So we're going to use Microsoft Planner for this. The easy way to do it is I'm going to add Planner as a tab. So I'll choose Add Tab. You can see there are thousands of possible tabs we could add in here. I'm going to choose Planner. It's up towards the top. So we're going to create a new plan. If I had an existing plan from this team, I could do it. In this case, I don't. We'll call this Permit Plan. This will take just a second. Now this is Microsoft Planner, but this is Microsoft Planner inside Microsoft Teams, and you don't see all the menus for Microsoft Planner. I like to see all the menus, so what I can do is over here on the top right, there's this pop-out button. Actually, I think this one just pops it over to there. There is a.
Just click the globe.
Is it the globe?
Yeah.
Oh, it is. Okay. Didn't used to be a globe.
So this is opening the Planner online app. Yeah.
Yeah. So now we're in a web browser, and now we're in Microsoft Planner in just a regular web tab. By default, it's blank. You can see that we have a plan called Permit Plan. The way Microsoft Planner works in the board view, which is where we are, is tasks and buckets. You create tasks, which you may or may not assign to somebody, and the tasks belong in buckets. By default, you have one bucket, and the bucket is called To Do. You can see here where we have Add New Bucket. I could call this For Jackie. Maybe I make another bucket called For Aaron. I can create a task under any of the buckets by clicking on the Add Task button. So this is our permit plan plan. Let's full electrical. And I'm just going to give it a name, and I'm just going to press enter. And that's a task. So it's a simple task. All it is just the words pull electrical and a checkbox for when it's done. If I want to add more to that task, I can. If I click on it in the middle, you can see I get this whole task screen with a lot more things I can do. I can define how far along I am with the progress on this. I can define a priority for this. I can define a start date and a due date. If it has one, I can add notes. If there is a sub checklist of items that has to happen for this task, I could do it here. Go to permit department and whatever. So now I have 2 tasks that have to happen for this task to be completed. And I can add comments, and this is what you guys were talking about earlier. When you post comments here, they don't necessarily notify anybody. Technically, they're supposed to notify whoever is assigned to the task. Well, I haven't assigned anybody yet. So I could assign this to Jackie. Notice that it has to be somebody who is associated with this plan, which means it has to be somebody who belongs in our team. Jackie just got a notification because I heard it.
Yeah.
So I've done some basic editing on this plan. I'm going to close this for a minute. Another thing I can do is I have categories over here on the right, and you can rename these. By default, they're color coded. I'm going to close that for now. There's no save. It's automatically saved. You can see my task card expanded a little bit. It's now telling me that I have 2 subtasks and 0 are complete, and then it's been assigned to Jackie Flynn. From here, I can assign it to somebody else with just the assign to button. And this is kind of one way that you could organize things. So you could have a bucket for each person and then put the task for that person under the bucket. So this is actually for Jackie. I'm just going to drag it over here and put it under her bucket. You could also have tasks that represent different categories. So, maybe there's a category for graphics and a category for writing and a category for administration. Maybe there's a category for different departments. There's a lot of different ways to do it. The way I've found it to be most effective is to use more of a Kanban style. Let me show you what I mean. So for right now, I'm going to move pull electrical back over here to do. And I'm going to rename Jackie to be due next. I'm going to rename for Aaron. Now I can do this because there's no tasks associated with it. If there was a whole lot of stuff assigned to Aaron and I just changed the name of the bucket, that would confuse everybody. But this is a new plan. We're just getting started. We're going to call that doing now. We're going to add a bucket called waiting. We'll add a bucket called ready for approval. What this does, and I can keep going. I'm not limited by my screen. I could, we might have one called templates. We might have one called miscellaneous. You can go on forever and ever. We can scroll left and right. You can see down here, or with my mouse, I have a scroll wheel that I can push. The idea is that this is a life cycle for your tasks. So your tasks generally begin in the to-do section. So let's add a couple of fake tasks here.
Oh, wow. Don't want to forget to do that.
Yeah, well, which I actually have been forgetting to call my mom. I need to, I guess that's my subconscious reminding myself. I'm just making up random stuff here. So I've got a bunch of tasks here. By default, everything starts in the to-do column. You could just have to do, doing now, and ready for approval. That's the kind of simplest Kanban setup. And the idea is that all the people on this team, as they come in here, they're looking for something to be working on. They come over to do, they grab an item, they move it to doing now, and they assign it to themselves. So I'll assign this to me, and it's only assigned to me. So everything that's in the doing now bucket are the things that I'm working on currently. As a manager, if you want to provide some guidance, some prioritization on what to work on next, that's where the do next column comes in. So maybe calling mom should be the next thing on my task list. I'll put that in do next, and again, I'll assign that to me. What that does is that tells me, and now I'm manager and employee, so it makes no sense, but that would tell the person who it's assigned to that number one, this is assigned to them, and number two, this is highest on the priority list for them to work on next. It also tells other people who might be interested in doing that project, no, that's assigned to Chip, leave it for Chip, or at least talk to a supervisor before you go and take that away from them. As each task is done, it's moved to the ready for approval. And at that point, a manager would review it with the employee or with the colleague, and they would agree that it's done, and we would check the box for done. Now, the biggest problem with this approach is that box is so easy to check. So if I just check call mom, well, it's done. It's completed. It's off the board now. But you can see it says show completed, and there's a 1. If I drop down this list, there's that call mom. I can uncheck it and bring it back to life. So what we do with Bigger Brains is we look for the completed ones that are in any of the columns besides ready for approval, and we bring those back to life and move them over to ready for approval. What does this look like in real life? I'm going to show some of how the sausage is made here.
One thing I also like about this kind of planning is that if you have due next and you have 5 things assigned to Aaron, which happens often in our team, you can drag and drop the order of them in that column to say this is the most important, and that can really help with prioritization as well.
Yeah, so this is a real priority board for Bigger Brains. I hope there's nothing embarrassing here. And what she's talking about is this is just our core staff, and everybody has what they're working on in progress. You can see some have more than one. So Jackie's on a couple of things here. There's Aaron there. There's Aaron there. Just 2 for Aaron. Jackie's got 3. It's probably, oh, yeah, there's some more for Aaron down here. Now this is confusing. There's a lot of stuff going on here. Maybe I'm having a management meeting with Aaron. I want to only look at the things that are assigned to him. Well, that's easy. There's a filter button up here. I can choose filter. It's a little slow to respond. And if I check Aaron, now it's only showing me the tasks that are assigned to Aaron throughout the entire planner board. So now I can review everything that he's working on. I can see that he's got something up in the ready for approval category, so we could review this together, and if we know it's done, we can mark it complete. Jackie's gonna be mad at me because I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And what Jackie was saying is I can reorganize, or I can reorder these based on priority. So if this is the most important thing, I can move it back up to the top. And then Aaron can, in theory, look at this planner board, prioritize things by where they are in this list. When he's ready for something else on his plate, he can grab it from do next. As a manager, I can go in and look at the to-do list and prioritize things by moving them to do next. This system has worked really well for us. We've been using it at Bigger Brains for a while. It wasn't original to us. This is kind of a standard with a lot of companies, but it's a great way to do it. And the nice thing is, let's go back to our...
Chip, you didn't really mention what we use waiting for when someone's asking.
Oh, okay. Well, they have to wait for an answer. Here's our permit plan. One thing I want to show real quick is, so right now we have these 3 tasks in to do and 1 in do next, and that's really all we have on here because we completed that 1. Back in Teams, I see the same thing. It's just kind of simplified. I don't see all the menus. But it is all the same information. The other thing I can do with Planner that I can't do in Teams is it's normal to have multiple plans. You generally won't have all of your business in one plan because the structure is going to be a little different. The people may be a little different. The department may be a little different. So you may have a plan for each department or a plan for each area of the business. There's a thing called the Planner Hub where you can go and look at all of your plans and the activity in those. And there's a place called My Tasks where you can see everything that's assigned to you across all of the plans. So it brings it all together in one place for you to look at. Now let's get back to that question about waiting. A lot of times when you're working on something, you get held up through no fault of your own. Maybe you're waiting on somebody to get back to you. Maybe you've passed it off to somebody else, or you sent it out to an outside contractor or whatever. That's what waiting is for. We throw it over to waiting so we don't forget about it. It's still there. Once whatever the obstacle is cleared up, then we move it back over to doing now when we get on with our lives. And as is often the case, I have been very wordy and I've used up almost all of our time, but I have covered most of what I wanted to cover. Oh, there's one quick thing I want to cover, but first let's get to some questions. Do we have any good questions, Jackie?
We have some great questions. Is it possible to default to always open in the desktop app, like when you're opening a Word document or something? I think it's what they mean.
I do not think so. I don't know a way to do it.
Yeah, I haven't noticed one either. I understand the desire though. I always end up in the desktop app for sure.
Yeah.
Chip's wrong. I'm old. We have two questions about uploading files. So one of them is, you get an error if you try to upload more than 10. So what's the
Hmm.
proper way to upload a bunch? Wouldn't it be like SharePoint or something?
Yeah,
Or could you upload a folder that had more than 10 files?
possibly. I'll tell you the way that I do it. SharePoint. Remember the story I told at the beginning about how Microsoft looked around and they had all these technologies and they said, "Hey, wouldn't it be great if we mashed all these together?" Um, Not all of these technologies were very graceful about how that all worked out. SharePoint was never originally intended to do the things that it's doing now in terms of file sharing. And the way you know that is because of situations like that. Also, until recently, there were a lot of problems with certain characters in file names. Even things like parentheses or underscore or dash was a problem for a while. In file names would just choke SharePoint. So you had problems with that. They fixed a lot of that, but there is still some of that. The way that I like to do it, so let's go back to our team so we can see what we're talking about. So here's the files section. So our permits and surveys file section has nothing. Let's go to the PR plan. That's where we put it. And under files, I have this one file called vendors. The magic of SharePoint is that you can sync it to your local computer. Notice that we have this button here that says sync. This is also new to Teams. It used to be you had to go to SharePoint to see it. If you're on a Windows computer, if you're on a Windows 10 computer, and unless you have disabled OneDrive for Business, which is, or OneDrive, the OneDrive app is built into Windows 10. Unless it's been disabled, then all I have to do is click on sync. And what it's going to do is it's going to make a local copy of this folder on my local hard drive. If you're on a Mac, you just need to download and install the OneDrive app before you do this. It'll do the same thing. Notice that while I was doing that, it refreshed itself and it did get this folder called email messages, because remember we emailed that conversation, it came in as a picture. That picture is going to be in that folder called email messages. This may take a minute, so I'll kind of X out of that for a second. The way it manifests itself is on your local computer in File Explorer, you will see a section that looks like this. This is the SharePoint logo, kind of. It'll have your organization's name. So our organization is Bigger Brains. If you drop this down, these are all the different SharePoint sites that I'm syncing with here. And notice that there is a Project Blue PR plan that just showed up. If I click on this, there's that vendors file, there's the recips folder that I spelled wrong, and there's the email messages folder. So if I have a lot of files that I want to upload, I do this and I drag them all into this folder. And if the day comes that I don't want to sync this to my local computer anymore, I can turn that off in the OneDrive app. It's not sharing on this monitor, but in the lower left corner, you'll have the OneDrive logo in your system tray. It looks like a little cloud. Right click on that, go into settings, and you can choose to stop syncing. That's the easy way that I do it. What else do we have question-wise, Jackie?
We use an online document storage software for our files, World Docs. Can you pull files in from places like this other than on your drive?
Probably not World Docs. So there are integrations with Dropbox, Box.com, and it used to be Box.com. Dropbox and Google Drive are here by default. Box.com I know has an integration. So by default, I can actually click here and I will see the Bigger Brains Dropbox account, except it's wanting me to log in. I guess my password expired, so I'll cancel out of that. But once you've logged in, you'll actually see all your Dropbox files and you can copy them from Dropbox directly into Microsoft Teams. For you to do it with World Docs, it would be dependent on them to have an integration. Now, more and more that's happening. So what you might do is come down here in the apps and search for World, is it called World Docs?
DOX. I think it's one word. So maybe not yet.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it. But there's one, for example, that some of my clients use called Ignite. And Ignite is now here. So if you add this Ignite app, then you can start moving your files from Ignite over to Teams. And of course, they would hope vice versa. That's why they put the app there.
Cindy Marcingill said there are third-party tools that will do a one-way sync to DMS tools. I'm assuming that's document management tools. Prosperoware.
Yes. Yes, you are
Look
correct.
at that Prosperoware. You could look for that Prosperoware.
Yeah, it's depending on the number of files you've got. The issue you run into is structure, because most file sharing apps, Dropbox, Box.com, Google Drive, whatever, you've got basically one monolithic set of folders, meaning that that you've got one set of folders, just like on an old network server or your current network server. And in the new world of teams, you might want to have this folder in this team, this folder in that team, and I mean like a folder structure, right? So like all your marketing folders might be underneath a folder called marketing, and then you have subfolders underneath that. Maybe you want that folder to be in the marketing team. Being able to organize and sort through that, I'm not sure. The third-party tools might do that. They didn't last time I used them, but I'll be fair, it's been 3 years since I used them. So it's entirely likely they've gotten better. You can, of course, do it through this kind of sync, like I mentioned, by syncing it to your local hard drive. Oh, mine's closed, but that can take a really long time. If you've got a lot of files, you might need a lot of space on your local machine and a fast internet connection, and even then, it can take days or weeks if you're trying to move a lot of files. Good questions. What else do we have?
That's all the questions I had. We got through them.
Cool. So I want to show you guys one little trick. I just learned this week. I'm pretty happy about it. So one of the problems with Teams is that, like I said, you can have hundreds and thousands of teams over here in your Teams menu, and it gets hard. Remember how I've had to scroll through this a couple of times to find that Project Blue project down here. Microsoft has added some features the last couple of years, some AI functions to try to guess which projects you're most interested in and move them to the top to make them easier. They'll also hide the ones, see down here in the hidden teams, they'll hide the ones that I haven't been to recently. But if you have thousands of teams, it would be nice if you had an easy way to get to the ones that you need to get to. So let's take our Project Blue here, for example. I'm going to go to the general channel. It would be nice if I have a series of related projects, and as you can see on the screen, I've got Project Blue, Project Green, Project Red. Maybe these are my core projects. I want an easy way to switch back and forth between them. One way I can do it is with SharePoint. So if I go to SharePoint, and I won't go through all the steps now. If you guys want to stick around, if you want me to, I'll be happy to do it. But I can go to a SharePoint and create a new SharePoint site, create a new SharePoint list, and use that as an index to all my important project files. And the way it manifests itself, let me pop over to here. So I've created a SharePoint site. I've created a SharePoint list called Master Projects List that has my 3 existing projects. I'm going to copy this URL back over in Teams. I'm going to add SharePoint. I'm going to wait for Microsoft to respond. So I'm going to add a list. There's no list on this site. I have to choose add a page or list from any SharePoint site. And now it wants the URL. So I'll paste that URL in here and choose save. And wait for Microsoft. So now what I've got is essentially a SharePoint list embedded in my team as an index. Now I have Project Red, Project Green, Project Orange. If I want to jump to the Project Red team, I can click on this link. It's going to try to open it in the web, but it's going to pop me back over here to my Project Red. I think that's where it put me.
Yeah, it says PR, so you're in Project Red.
Okay.
Because it says PR in the little icon.
Oh yeah, thanks. Okay. When you name them all the same, you have a problem with that. And I think this was originally called My Excellent Project too. That's the only reason I think that keeps popping up there. Yeah. So same idea. This one has the tab called Projects. I can tab over and jump over to Project Orange. Again, it's going to pop out to the website before it pops back into Teams. But now here we are in Project Orange. So it becomes a quick and dirty little index of getting to your most popular projects, especially when you have related tasks. To edit that, I can go to it on any page. It's a SharePoint list, so most of my functionality is here. I can either choose Quick Edit, and this becomes like an Excel spreadsheet. It's like a little chart. And I can come down here to the new line, and I'll put in my Project Blue. Now I need to get my Teams link for Project Blue, so I'll click on the 3 dot next to Project Blue, get a link to the team. Copy that, paste it in here. And now I've got my link to Project Blue. So not the most elegant solution, but kind of a quick and dirty way to get back and forth between different projects, especially if you have a lot of teams to sort through.
We're getting even more good questions, but given it's, do you want to keep?
Yeah, no, we can keep answering for as long as we want to.
Okay, well, I'll just say, if anyone does drop off, thank you very much for being here, and we'll just keep answering questions because, like I said, Chip knows a lot. Why wouldn't you just pin them, the teams, instead of this index? That's one of the questions.
Yeah, you definitely could. If you know ahead of time that that's what you're going to do. But here's the thing. That's the pinning is true for your team, not anybody else's. So as you add new people to the projects, this gives them an easy way to get back and forth between them. But you're right. You can actually, and you don't pin teams, I don't think. Yeah, you don't pin the team. You actually pin the channel. So for example, if I wanted to pin under Project Blue, if I wanted to pin this PR plan, and click on the 3-dot menu and choose pin. And now up at the top of my team list, I've got PR plan, but I don't have the whole team. I just have that one channel. And again, for anybody else that's coming into this, they don't have an easy way to get back and forth between them. So it's just kind of an extra way to give them more navigation. Yeah, you could email out the list of links. The nice thing about this using a SharePoint list is it's always live. You know, like I just did, if somebody adds a new project, they can come in here and update it. You can also use this SharePoint page in other places. Obviously, the SharePoint site itself could be like an internal intranet, so a lot of different ways to use it. But you're right, there's a lot of different ways to skin a fish, so to speak. Is that the expression?
I think it's a cat.
Skin a cat? Why would you skin a cat? That's cruel.
I don't. It's terrible. Glenn was saying that the index would be great if you could create a SharePoint list of your sections or page in a OneNote notebook. Maybe a discussion for another time.
Yeah, you can do it in OneNote. You can also do it in Excel. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to do it. The nice thing with the SharePoint list is it loads a little bit faster. As far as linking to a OneNote section, I don't remember if that's possible or not, actually. I have to try that out and see. But it's a good question. And again, that's kind of the thing I like about Teams is there are a dozen different ways to accomplish most of the things you want to accomplish. Sometimes there's pros and cons, but there's not necessarily a right and wrong. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. What else do we have? We have any other questions?
Nope.
Cool. Well, you guys, thanks so much for tuning into our webinar. I hope this was helpful. Jackie, you want to show the last couple slides and invite people for next week?
Yeah, if you unshare, I will do that.
Oh, I have to do that, don't I?
Sorry about the transition time here. Two different slide decks going on.
It's that Mac, it's hard to use.
Wait, can you see it?
No.
No.
You stopped sharing. I think you were just sharing the one PowerPoint.
Well, we're going to lose people while I'm trying to do this, but it's okay.
So while she's bringing that up, next week, our presenter is going to be Idaho Idakpai. I know I'm getting his name wrong. Oh, yeah. Is next week? No, next week is Idaho. Is it Emily?
I think it's Emily. Are you seeing it now?
Yeah, no, well, I'm seeing your presenter view now.
Oh, well, I'll just talk presenter view. Yeah, so we have these every Tuesday at 5. We really enjoy them, and we hope you do too. And I'm pretty sure next week is Emily. Chip thinks it's someone else, but
no, I think you're right. I'm wrong.
Okay, if you look at again, just go to getbiggerbrains.com, and the latest blog post has all the information and the registration. There is a limited number of registrations. We haven't hit the limit yet, but we've gotten close to some of them. So make sure you register if you're interested.
I do see one more question. Glenn is asking, why do we choose Zoom over Teams meeting? Well, 2 reasons. One, the Zoom webinar function is nice. And the other thing is Teams meeting is hard to use with outside guests. There's not a registration function like there is with the Zoom, like you guys did today. The controls aren't quite up to par with Zoom. It's just so much easier with outside people to use something like Zoom. I've tried to use Teams. We use Teams a lot internally for meetings, but whenever there's outside people involved, it's just so much easier to use Zoom. So great question. Appreciate all the great questions. Appreciate you guys tuning in. I hope everybody has a great evening or a great morning or a great afternoon, wherever you are in the world. So Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank y'all.